The volcano did not look dangerous today. That was always the first lie Orvith told you. Adrian Wolf had learned that in his first week on this planet, 3 years ago, when a mountain that looked like a painted backdrop had opened a fissure half a kilometer wide in under 4 hours. Since then, he treated every quiet slope the same way he treated a stranger who smiled too fast, politely, but with both eyes open. He set his scanner on the flat rock, adjusted the calibration dial by hand because the automatic setting had been reading wrong since Tuesday, and crouched to check the output screen. The numbers were doing something odd again near the northeast ridge. A pressure shift. Not dangerous, probably, but not nothing either. He made a note in his field log with a pencil. His tablet's voice recorder didn't work well near the volcanic mineral deposits. Nobody in the outpost ever read his pencil notes. He wrote them anyway. The sky above Mount Verith was that particular shade of deep orange that Orvith got in the late afternoon, when its two suns sat at different heights and argued with each other about the light. It made the ash-gray ridgeline look almost warm. Adrian didn't notice. He was thinking about the pressure numbers. He ate half a protein bar. He put the other half in his jacket pocket for later. He stood up, stretched his back, and was reaching for the scanner when something large hit his equipment crate from above with a crash that sent the whole thing sideways. Adrian did not fall over. He had good balance. 3 years on a volcanically active planet with uneven terrain will do that. He looked at the crate. Sitting on top of it, amidst the scattered sensor probes that had flown in every direction, was a dragon. A small one, about the size of a large mountain dog, maybe a little bigger. Scaled in gold and deep blue, the colors overlapping in a pattern that looked almost like a map of something. 2 wings were folded against its back in the stiff, careful way of something that had recently tried to use them for the first time and had not fully worked out the technique. 1 wing had a small scrape on the leading edge. The hatchling's eyes, amber, very large, vertical pupils, were fixed on some point in the middle distance with the concentrated expression of a creature pretending it had meant to do that. Adrian looked at the hatchling. He looked up at the ridge above, from which she had obviously fallen. He looked back at her. She was holding very still, the way young creatures hold still when they're hoping you haven't fully processed what just happened. He had been around adult Drakkari long enough not to panic. They were enormous and ancient, and carried themselves like geography. This one was small and had just crashed into his equipment, and her back right leg was shaking slightly, which probably meant the landing had rattled her more than she was letting on. He checked. Nothing looked broken. Wings, legs, tail all moving. Just a scrape and probably some wounded pride. Adrian straightened up, put his pencil behind his ear, and did what he always did when meeting someone new. He extended his right hand, palm facing up, open, steady. "You all right?" he said. "I'm Adrian." The hatchling went still in a different way. Not the frozen stillness of pretending. Something else. Her eyes moved from the middle distance and fixed on his hand. Her pupils widened slowly. The shaking in her back leg stopped. Then, with a gravity that seemed too large for something so small, she lifted her right forepaw and set it into his palm. He shook it once, gently. Her claws were small and neat against his fingers. They were warm. The scales on her paw had a texture like very fine stone. "Nice to meet you," he said. He let go, turned back to the scanner, and began collecting the probes that had scattered across the rock. Behind the northeast ridge, at a distance that an ordinary person would call hidden and a Drakkari would call obvious, 3 scouts of Clan Vorith had been watching the hatchling's first glide attempt for the past 20 minutes. They had seen the fall. They had been moving to intervene when the human appeared from behind the survey crate. They watched him extend his hand. They watched Nira place her paw in it. They watched the human go back to his equipment. The eldest of the 3 scouts, a warrior named Brath who had served Clan Vorith for 211 years and believed himself to have seen most things worth seeing, made a sound low in his chest. The sound did not translate cleanly into galactic standard. The closest version was something like, "Oh, that just happened." None of the 3 scouts moved for several seconds. Then Brath said, very quietly, "We need to tell the elder." The other 2 agreed. All 3 of them looked at Nira, who was now watching the human work with an expression that, in a Drakkari of any age, meant something had just been decided. Adrian found the last probe under the lip of the overturned crate, noted that its casing was cracked and would need replacing, and added that to his report. He glanced at the hatchling once more. She was still on the crate. She was watching him. You probably shouldn't be out here alone, he told her. She said nothing. She was a hatchling, and he didn't speak much Drackery beyond hello and please. He finished packing up, shouldered his bag, and headed back toward Outpost 7. Behind him, Nira sat on the crate for a long time after he left. Then she spread her wings. The scraped one ached, but she didn't fold it, and glided, cleanly this time, back up to the ridge. The scouts followed. Nobody said anything on the way back to the hold. Some things, Brath had learned, needed a moment before you put words to them. The thing about Wing Speaker Orth was that he never arrived unannounced. He always sent a formal notice, a carved stone tile delivered by a junior courier. In the old Drackery tradition, even when a basic comm message would have worked. He believed in ceremony the way some people believe in architecture, as proof that something was built to last. So when Adrian came back from the survey site and found Orth standing at the entrance to Outpost 7 with no tile, no courier, and no appointment, his first thought was that something had gone wrong with the Ridge survey. His second thought was that Orth looked like a man who had been handed a problem and had not yet decided where to put it down. Orth was tall for a Drackery, not large like the elders, but tall and angular, with silver-blue scales and the careful, deliberate posture of someone who weighed every word before it left his mouth. He wore the sash of his office, which was formal. He was not carrying anything. He looked at Adrian for a moment before speaking. "The Clan Vorth requests your presence at the mountain hold," he said. "Tomorrow morning, at first sun." Adrian shifted his bag on his shoulder. "Is this about the Northeast Ridge survey? Because I can bring the maps. I just need to print the updated readings." "Bring no maps," Orth said. He left without further explanation. Adrian watched him go. Then he went inside, washed the volcanic dust off his hands, and went to find Davin. Davin was in the shared dining room, which smelled of whatever the outpost's food printer had decided tonight was seasoned rice. He was reading something on his tablet and eating without looking at his food, which was a habit that drove the outpost's medics slowly toward despair. Davin was the kind of person who always seemed to be in the middle of a very interesting thought. He had been stationed on Orvith for 18 months, which was newer than Adrian, but long enough that he had spent most of his free time reading everything he could find about the Drackery, because, as he put it, "There's not much else to do, and they're fascinating, and I refuse to just watch old films for 2 years." Adrian sat down across from him and said, "Orth showed up tonight. Clan Vorith wants me at the hold tomorrow." Davin looked up from his tablet. "What for?" "He didn't say. Told me not to bring maps." Davin frowned. Set his tablet down. "What did you do today?" "Survey. Northeast Ridge. The scanner's still reading wrong near the..." "Did anything else happen?" Adrian thought about it. "A hatchling fell off the ridge onto my equipment crate. She was fine. I checked." Davin went very still. "You interacted with a Drackery hatchling?" "She landed on my crate. I said hello. She left." "How did you say hello?" Adrian looked at him. "What do you mean, how?" "I put my hand out. Said my name." Davin picked his tablet back up. He opened something. He scrolled. He read. His face did a series of things that Adrian could not fully interpret, moving through expressions quickly, stopping on something that might have been alarm. "Adrian," Davin said, "your right hand. Palm up. That's how you shake hands." "Did she put her paw in your hand?" "Yes." "So." Davin put the tablet flat on the table, face up, and pushed it toward him. On the screen was a passage from a text on Drackery kinship law, translated into Galactic Standard, dated about 60 years ago. The relevant section was titled, "The Right of Open Bonding, Origin and Obligation." Adrian read it. He read it again. He read the part that said an open right hand, palm upward, extended directly toward a hatchling, accepted by the hatchling placing its forepaw into that hand, constituted under Drackery law a formal and permanent claim of kinship guardianship. He read the part that said the right was binding upon both parties from the moment of contact. He put the tablet down. "I was just saying hello," he said. "I know. I didn't know what it meant. I know. She's a hatchling. I thought she was going to be scared. I was being friendly." "Yes, Adrian." Davin leaned forward. "In Drackery law, you just proposed to take responsibility for that hatchling. In front of witnesses. and she accepted. Adrian was quiet for a moment. The scouts on the ridge. They saw all of it. That's why Orith is here. Davin paused. That's why he said no maps. This is not a survey meeting. The outpost's food printer beeped in the corner. Neither of them moved. At the mountain hold of Clan Vorith, Elder Sorith sat in the deep chamber at the heart of the caldera and listened to Brath's report without interrupting once. She was old enough that the mountain itself was younger than some of her memories. Her scales were deep amber, almost brown, the color of old stone. She asked one question when Brath finished. The hand, open, palm up, extended first toward the hatchling? Yes, Elder. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that the torches in the chamber burned lower before she spoke again. Then it is done, she said. The human has offered the bond to Nira of Vorith. She accepted before witnesses. The clan will honor it. Orith, who had returned by then, asked with great care. The human did not know the meaning of the gesture. The gesture does not require understanding, Sorith said. It requires doing. And the hatchling's acceptance requires wisdom. Nira is young, but she is Vorith. She closed her eyes. We honor it. No one argued. No one ever argued with Sorith. By the time Adrian finally got up from the table and went to bed, he had read the kinship law passage for more times. He lay on his bunk in the dark and stared at the ceiling. The hatchling had looked at his hand for a long moment before she placed her paw in it. He kept thinking about that. Adrian had been to the mountain hold twice before, once for a boundary survey briefing, once for a mineral rights meeting that had lasted 6 hours and resolved nothing. Both times, a single Drakkari official had met him at the lower gate and walked him to a small carved room that served as the hold's reception hall. This time, the gate was open. Both of them. All the way. Farron was waiting outside. He was young for a Drakkari warrior, only 60 years old, which the adult Drakkari treated the way humans treated a 22-year-old who had just gotten his first serious job. He was dark green with pale gold markings along his neck and shoulders, and he carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had been told this was an important duty and intended to execute it perfectly or not at all. He looked at Adrian. He looked at Adrian's empty hands. He said nothing and walked inside. Adrian followed. The inner court of the hold was carved directly into the caldera wall, open to the sky above. It was enormous. The stone was old and dark, and the walls rose in stepped tiers, and on every tier stood Drakkari. Not dozens. Hundreds. Different sizes, different scales, different ages. All still. Adrian had been an engineer for 12 years. He was not easy to rattle. But walking into that court and having 300 or 400 dragons watch him in complete silence was a thing that registered somewhere below the thinking part of the brain, in a place that had been keeping humans alive on difficult planets for a very long time. He kept walking. He found Orith at the center. He stood beside him. Elder Sorith was across the court. She was sitting, but sitting she was still taller than most of the adults standing around her. Her amber scales caught the light. Her eyes were the deep, dark orange of cooling lava, and they moved to Adrian with a patience that suggested she had spent centuries waiting for things and did not find it difficult. Nira was there too, sitting 10 meters to Sorith's left, smaller than everything else in the court, watching Adrian with her large amber eyes and the specific expression of a creature who was not going to show how interested she was. Orith began to speak. His voice was formal and careful. He explained everything, the right of open bonding, its history, its requirements, what it meant for both parties. He spoke in Galactic Standard for Adrian's benefit. He did not abbreviate. He did not soften it. Adrian listened without interrupting. When Orith finished, Adrian asked one question. Does Nira know what it means? Orith translated. Nira lifted her chin. She said, in slow, careful Galactic Standard, accented but clear, yes. I accepted. Adrian nodded once. Can I speak with Orith privately for a moment? Sorith inclined her head. They moved to the edge of the court, out of easy hearing. Adrian kept his voice level. I want to be honest, he said. I did not know what the gesture meant. I didn't intend to perform any rite. I was saying hello. I want the elder and the clan to know that, not as an excuse, but as a fact. Orith related. Sorith's response came back in pieces. The elder says she understands. She also says the gesture does not require intent. It requires doing. What matters now is what you choose to do with what has been done. Adrian looked at Sorith across the court. She was watching him the way very old things watch things that are still figuring out whether they're going to matter. What does the clan expect? He asked. Orith relayed this too. Sorith replied at length. The elder says the clan expects you to either learn what the bond means and carry it, or to formally decline in the proper ceremony, which Clan Vorith will accept without shame. She says, and this is her exact word, that we do not cage bonds. She is offering you time to understand before you choose. 1 full moon cycle. 34 days. Adrian looked at Nira. She was not looking at him. She was looking at a point on the far wall with deliberate focus. Her tail was still. Her shoulders were stiff. She was waiting. He could see that clearly. He thought about the moment on the ridge. The long pause before she placed her paw in his hand. She had looked at his open palm for several seconds. She had not been startled into it. She had decided. I want to understand it, Adrian said. If I'm going to carry something, I want to know what it weighs. Tell the elder, 34 days. I'll learn. Orith translated. Sorith was silent for a moment. Then she made a sound, low, slow, resonant, that seemed to settle into the stone of the court walls. The elder approves, Orith said. He paused. For context, this is the most flexible position she has ever taken on clan law in my memory. That covers 170 years. Adrian nodded. He looked back at Nira. She had turned her head now and was watching him. Her pupils were wide. He gave her a small, plain nod. She looked away immediately, but her tail, he noticed, uncurled slightly. On the walk back down the mountain, Farron fell into step 2 meters behind him without being asked. When Adrian glanced back, Farron looked straight ahead and said nothing. Are you following me? Adrian asked. I am carrying out an assigned duty, Farron said. What duty? Farron hesitated. Proximity observation of the bonded party. You're my shadow. I am carrying out an assigned duty, Farron said again. Adrian decided not to argue. The mountain was quiet around them. The 2 suns were low, and the sky had gone the deep violet it turned in the hour before dark. He had 34 days to learn what he had done. He was going to need more pencils. On the 3rd day, Nira told Adrian his handwriting was too small to read. He was sitting at the low stone table in the guest quarters they had given him inside the hold, a carved room that smelled of cool mineral rock and something faintly like cedar, working through his 2nd reading of the bondholder's texts, which were old even by Drackery standards. He was writing notes in the margins of his printed translation because the margins were the only place that had room. Nira had been in the doorway for about 4 minutes before she said anything. I can see that it is writing, she said, in her careful galactic standard. I cannot see what it says. It's notes, Adrian told her. For studying. Why are they so small? Because the margins are small. She walked inside and sat down, which she did without asking, the same way she had done on the 2nd day and the 1st. She looked at the text. She looked at his notes. She looked at the text again. That passage means the bondholder does not speak for the hatchling, she said. It means they answer for them. There is a difference. Adrian put down his pencil. What's the difference? Speaking for means you decide what the other wants. Answering for means that if they act wrongly, you also carry the weight of that action. She tilted her head. It is about accountability, not authority. He wrote that in the margin, small as ever. She watched him do it. Farron, who was in the doorway now because Nira had taken his spot, made no comment. That was how most days went. Adrian read, took notes, asked Orith questions in the formal study sessions each afternoon, and in the gaps Nira would appear and explain things that the written texts made complicated in ways that a hatchling who had grown up inside this culture made simple. He did not ask her to do this. She did it anyway. He began to understand that she was, in her own way, doing something generous, not because she was required to, but because she had decided to. On the 9th day, he made a mistake in the afternoon session, misread a passage about the difference between a bond declared in the hold and one declared in open ground, and stated something backwards to Orith. Orith corrected him without expression. Adrian corrected his notes and moved on. That night, Nira came and said, without preamble, Orith does not like correcting people. He finds it uncomfortable, but he will always do it. I know, Adrian said. You were not embarrassed. No. She considered this. Most visitors are. They go quiet when they are corrected. You just wrote the right thing down. Being embarrassed doesn't fix the mistake, Adrian said. She stared at him for a moment. Then she said, I know, but most people feel it anyway. He thought about that. Then he said, I feel it a little, but the mistake is the thing that matters, not how I feel about it. She said nothing to that, but she stayed for another hour, going through the evenings reading with him, pointing out 2 more places where the translation was slightly loose. On the 17th day, Farron spoke to him without being spoken to first. It happened late, close to the time Adrian usually went to sleep. He was still at the table, working through a complex section of kinship law that dealt with the bondholder's obligations in the event of the hatchling's injury or death. It was dense and formal, and kept using a Drackery concept that didn't translate neatly, something between grief and debt. He stopped, looked at the word, read around it 4 times. You've been staring at that word for a long time, Farron said from the doorway. Adrian looked up. It doesn't translate right. What does it mean? Farron came in, the first time he had done so. He looked at the text. He thought for a moment. It means, if something happens to the one you are bonded to, the loss is not just a feeling. It is something you owe them, as if their existence made a place in the world that must be honored even after they are gone. Adrian looked at the word again. Grief as obligation. Yes, Farron said. Exactly that. Adrian wrote it in the margin. Farron watched him do it. He didn't leave immediately after. He sat down, carefully, on the floor, the way a very upright person sits when they're not entirely sure they should be sitting, and stayed until Adrian closed the text. On the 29th day, Sorith called him for a midpoint meeting. She asked him nothing about the texts. She asked him instead what he thought the bond meant to Nira. Adrian thought about it seriously before he answered. She wanted someone who would pay attention, he said. Not someone big, not someone important. Someone who would look at her and actually see her. He paused. She tested the handshake because it was a real thing, not a ceremony. It was what I actually do when I meet someone. Sorith listened. Orith translated. Sorith said nothing for a moment. Then she said, in slow galactic standard she rarely used directly, You are not wrong. On the 34th night, Adrian sat alone in the stone room with all his notes spread out and read through every page from the beginning. The scratched pencil writing, the tight margins, the corrections over wrong answers, 5 weeks of it. He closed the last page. He knew what he held. He had known for a while. He just wanted to be sure. Tomorrow he would stand in the court and say so out loud. Davin arrived at the hold gate at first sun wearing his best jacket, which he had pressed the night before using a flat piece of heated metal because the outpost's clothing iron had broken 2 months ago and nobody had ordered a replacement. He looked presentable. He also looked like a man who was doing everything in his power not to look as nervous as he felt. Captain Strand was with him, in full-duty uniform. Behind them were 3 other outpost staff members who had volunteered to attend as witnesses. Farron met them at the gate. He looked at Davin's jacket. He said nothing, which Davin later described as a mercy. The court was full. Every member of Clan Vorith who could be present was. The tiers along the caldera walls held more Drackery than Adrian had seen gathered in one place in 3 years on Orvith. There were ancient ones near the upper tiers, so still they might have been the stone itself. There were young adults, wings half spread with the restlessness of creatures that found sitting still difficult. There were juveniles near the back, peering between adult legs to see what was happening. The mineral fire had been lit along the wall ledges, blue and pale gold, burning in carved stone channels, no smoke, just light that moved like something alive. The effect was that the whole court seemed to breathe. Orth stood at the center. He began to speak in Old Drackery, the formal, ancient register that even many Drackery found difficult to follow. His voice carried to every tier without effort, the way Drackery voices did when they chose to project. He spoke for some time. Davin leaned close to Captain Strand and whispered, He's reading Adrian's lineage. Strand looked at him. Does Adrian have a Drackery lineage? He didn't. So Orth read the history of humanity instead. Davin listened. He's currently describing the first time humans built something out of stone. I think. My old Drackery isn't great. Strand looked at Orth, who had not paused or slowed. How long is this going to take? He's been going for 12 minutes, Davin said. I think there's a lot of human history. It took 41 minutes. Nobody in Clan Vorith moved or made a sound. Orith reached the end and was silent. The court was silent. Then Adrian walked forward from the side of the court where he had been waiting. He was in his field clothes. He did not own anything more formal, and Sorith had told him through Orith that the clan did not need his clothes to be different. They needed his words to be right. He stopped in the center of the court. He looked at no one in particular. He found Nira in the crowd and looked at her for one moment, then looked ahead. He drew one breath. Then he spoke. The bondholder's responsibility. In Drakkari, every word from memory. The full version, not the abbreviated form used in lesser ceremonies. Orith had been firm about this. The rising pitch on the opening declaration. The sustained tone on the middle passage about wait and witness. The harmonic drop, a sound that human throats were not built for, something below a normal speaking tone, a vibration more than a note, on the final line. Without condition, without limit, without end. The last sound left the court. Silence. Davin was not crying. He was not. There was something in the mineral smoke that was affecting his eyes. Sorith moved. In a court of hundreds of Drakkari, her movement was the only one, and it pulled every eye. She rose from her position and turned to face the gathered clan. Her voice, when she spoke, was the slow, massive sound of deep stone shifting, not loud, but felt in the chest. Orith translated, very quietly, for the human observers. Clan Vorith witnesses. The bond holds. Nira of Vorith is held, and Adrian Wolf of the humans is now of Vorith. Not allied with Vorith. Not an honored friend of Vorith. Of Vorith. The clan responded. The sound they made was not a cheer. It was more structured than that, a layered vocalization that moved through the gathered hundreds in a wave, each voice finding its own place in it. It built from the lower tiers upward. The mineral fire brightened in the channels. Captain Strand stood very still with her hands clasped behind her back and looked like she was doing rapid calculations about what this was going to mean for her report. Nira walked from her place in the court and crossed the open ground to where Adrian stood. She sat down at his left side. She did not look at him. She faced the same direction he was facing, the same way she had been doing for the past 5 weeks, whenever she explained something from a text or corrected a misread passage, sitting beside him, not across from him. Adrian looked down at her. She did not look up. "You're not going to say anything?" he asked, very quietly. "I already said it," Nira said. "On the ridge." He had no answer to that. He looked back at the court. The layered sound from the clan was fading now, settling back into quiet, but the quality of the quiet had changed. It was a different kind of silence than it had been an hour ago, the kind that forms after something becomes permanent. Davin was absolutely not crying. He was going to maintain this position regardless of what anyone said. Farron stood at the edge of the court with his arms at his sides and his chin up, and if anyone had been paying attention, they might have noticed that his posture, for the first time in 34 days, was not stiff. It was simply steady. The 2 representatives from the Galactic Accord arrived 3 months after the ceremony on a mid-morning shuttle that landed with more ceremony than the situation required. Their names were Rel and Was. They were both experienced diplomats. They had handled border disputes, resource conflicts, a translation incident that had nearly started a war between 2 species who both used the color yellow to mean opposite things. They arrived on Orvith prepared for a political situation. What they found was Outpost 7's canteen, and Davin explaining subsurface mineral pressure gradients to a hatchling who was taking up 2 seats and half the table. Nira had opinions about pressure gradients. They were, Davin had discovered, frequently correct. She had been spending 3 or 4 mornings a week at the outpost for the past 2 months, initially sitting outside Adrian's workstation and eventually, through some gradual process that nobody had formally approved, ending up inside, looking at data on a second screen they had set up for her. Her claws were too large for the standard keyboard, so someone had ordered a specialized input device. It had arrived last week. She had not thanked anyone for it, but she had started using it immediately, which the team had decided to count. Rel and Was were brought to Captain Strand's office. Strand looked like a woman who had reorganized her definition of normal 3 times in the past 90 days and was at peace with it. She gave them her report. Then she answered their questions. Then they asked to speak with Adrian. He came in from the field site with dust on his jacket and his pencil behind his ear. He sat down, listened to their questions, and answered each one without editorializing. Yes, he intended to remain on Orvith. He had a survey to finish. His contract ran another 14 months, and he planned to renew it. Yes, he understood the precedent the bond represented. A human formally accepted into a Dracari clan. First time in recorded history. Yes, he was aware of the diplomatic implications. Rel, who had done most of the talking, leaned forward. Do you understand that you are now, under Dracari law, a member of one of the most influential clans on this planet? That clan Vorith has already begun including your outpost in conversations they previously held only internally. Yes, Adrian said. And Adrian thought about how to explain it. The mineral rights dispute on the northwest slope. Clan Vorith sent a formal communication to Outpost 7 last month. We resolved it in 2 meetings. Would have taken 8 months of back-channel negotiations before. He paused. Farron is learning Galactic Standard. He asked me for a grammar text last week. He said he wanted to be able to hear things without Orith filtering them. He paused again. Elder Sorith told me, through Orith, that she expects Nira to attend formal outpost operational briefings once a month when she is old enough. She said, and I am quoting exactly, that Clan Vorith's kin should understand what their kin does. Was wrote something down. And what does she do here? Right now? Geological analysis. Her pattern recognition on subsurface data is faster than our models. Adrian considered. She also broke Davin's coffee machine last week trying to understand how it worked. She put it back together correctly. It works better now. In the canteen, at that moment, Nira was explaining to Davin why his pressure mapping methodology was producing a bias in the southeast readings. She did this without looking up from the screen, in the same flat, precise tone she used for everything, which Davin had initially found abrasive and now found deeply reassuring, because it meant she was actually paying attention. Farron was in the doorway. He was holding a Galactic Standard grammar text. He was reading the chapter on irregular verbs with the expression of someone who had decided to win a war through patience. He had not told anyone he was learning the language for reasons beyond his assigned duty. Nobody asked directly. This was, all parties had silently agreed, better for everyone. Rel and Was left that afternoon with a report that was going to be difficult to file. The Accord had protocols for diplomatic incidents. It had protocols for first contacts, for cultural misunderstandings, for treaty disputes. It did not have a protocol for engineer accidentally performed an ancient kinship rite and then studied for 5 weeks and was accepted into the clan, and now things are substantially better. Was suggested they create one. Rel agreed. They called it the Wolf Protocol in the working draft, then changed it to something more official sounding, then changed it back. That evening, Adrian sat outside his quarters with his field notebook. Mount Verith glowed faintly on the horizon, the way it did most evenings, not dangerously, just present, the way old things are present when they are not asleep. Nira came and settled nearby. She was growing. Slowly, by Dracari standards. She would be growing for the next 2 centuries, but her head now came level with his shoulder when she sat beside him, which was higher than it had been. Farron was somewhere behind them, present as always, quieter lately. Nira looked at the mountain for a while. Then she asked, without turning her head, "Are you sorry it happened?" Adrian closed his notebook. He thought about the northeast ridge, the scanner with its wrong readings, half a protein bar in his pocket, a hatchling landing on his equipment crate and trying very hard to look like she had meant to. His open hand, palm up, her small paw, placed in it with the gravity of a decision already made. "No," he said. "Good," said Nira. "Neither am I." She had never lost control of that glide. Adrian had understood this for a while now. The ridge above the survey site was not steep. A hatchling who had been learning to fly for weeks, even imperfectly, would not tumble from it accidentally. Not Vorith. Not her. She had seen him below. She had seen his open, easy posture, his unhurried movements, the way he talked to his equipment like it could hear him. She had made a calculation faster than any geological model. She had chosen him first. The handshake had just been the formal part. He did not say this out loud. She did not confirm it. The mountain glowed. The night came in slow. Farron turned a page in his grammar text, quietly, in the dark. Some things do not need to be said. They just need to be true.